AESOP'S Fables. We'll conclude our series of AESOP'S Fables with Part 8, but first a reminder that while the actual details of his life are hazy at best, Aesop is best known to us as a Greek slave living in the 5th century BC, whose cleverness and wit embarrassed his philosopher master and won him his freedom. His subsequent travels paint him as an emissary and interpreter, but most importantly a writer. His many fables, such as The Hare and the Tortoise and The Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, have long since become proverbial. If you're following along in the table of contents from the original edition published by Hodder and Stoughton in London in 1909, in Part 8 in our final series of Aesop's Fables, we'll be reading the tales between The Travelers and the Plane Tree and The Frog's Complaint against the Sun. Aesop's Fables. The Travelers and the Plane Tree. Two travelers, worn out by the heat of the summer sun, laid themselves down at noon under the wide-spreading branches of a plane tree. As they rested under its shade, one of the travelers said to the other, "What a singularly useless tree is the plane! It bears no fruit, it is not of the least service to man." The plane tree, interrupting him, said, "You ungrateful fellows! Do you, while receiving benefits from me and resting under my shade, dare to describe me as useless and unprofitable? Some men despise their best blessings." The Mother and the Wolf. A famished wolf was prowling about in the morning in search of food. As he passed the door of a cottage built in the forest, he heard a mother say to her child, "Be quiet, or I will throw you out of the window, and the wolf shall eat you." The wolf sat all day waiting at the door. In the evening he heard the same woman fondling her child and saying, "He is quiet now, and if the wolf should come, he will kill him." The wolf, hearing these words, went home, gaping with cold and hunger. On his reaching his den, Mrs. Wolf inquired of him why he returned weary and supperless, so contrary to his wont. He replied, "Why, forsooth, because I gave credence to the words of a woman." The Ass and the Horse. An ass besought a horse to spare him a small portion of his feed. "Yes," said he, "if any remains out of what I am now eating, I will give it to you, for the sake of my own superior dignity, and if you will come when I shall reach my own stall in the evening, I will give you a little sack full of barley." The ass replied, "Thank you. I can't think that you, who refuse me a little matter now, will by and by confer on me a greater benefit." The Crow and the Sheep. A troublesome crow seated herself on the back of a sheep. The sheep, much against his will, carried her backward and forward for a long time, and at last said, "If you had treated a dog in this way, you would have had your deserts from his sharp teeth." To this the crow replied, "I despise the weak and yield to the strong. I know whom I may bully and whom I must flatter, and I thus prolong my life to a good old age." The Partridge and the Fowler. A fowler caught a partridge and was about to kill it. The partridge earnestly besought him to spare his life, saying, "Pray, master, permit me to live, and I will entice many partridges to you in recompense for your mercy to me." The fowler replied, "I shall now with the less scruple take your life, because you are willing to save it at the cost of betraying your friends and relations." The Fox and the Bramble. A fox, mounting a hedge when he was about to fall, caught hold of a bramble. Having pricked and grievously torn the soles of his feet, he accused the bramble, because, when he had fled to her for assistance, she had used him worse than the hedge itself. The bramble, interrupting him, said, "But you really must have been out of your senses to fasten yourself to me, who am myself always accustomed to fasten upon others." The Dog and the Oyster. A dog, used to eating eggs, saw an oyster, and opening his mouth to its widest extent, swallowed it down with the utmost relish, supposing it to be an egg. Soon afterwards, suffering great pain in his stomach, he said, "I deserve all this torment, for my folly in thinking that everything round must be an egg." Those who act without sufficient thought will often fall into unsuspected danger. The Flea and the Man. A man very much annoyed with a flea caught him at last and said, "Who are you who dare to feed on my limbs and to cost me so much trouble in catching you?" The flea replied, "Oh, my dear sir, pray spare my life and destroy me not, for I cannot possibly do you much harm." The man, laughing, replied, "Now you shall certainly die by my own hand, for no evil, whether it be small or large, ought to be tolerated." The Ass and the Charger. An ass congratulated a horse on being so ungrudgingly and carefully provided for, while he himself had scarcely enough to eat, nor even that without hard work. But when war broke out, and the heavy-armed soldier mounted the horse, and riding him to the charge, rushed into the very midst of the enemy, and the horse, being wounded, fell dead on the battlefield. Then the ass, seeing all these things, changed his mind, and commiserated the horse. The Lion, Jupiter, and the Elephant. The lion wearied Jupiter with his frequent complaints. "It is true," he said, "O Jupiter, that I am gigantic in strength, handsome in shape, and powerful in attack. I have jaws well provided with teeth, and feet furnished with claws, and I lord it over all the beasts of the forest, and what a disgrace it is that, being such as I am, I should be frightened by the crowing of a cock." Jupiter replied, "Why do you blame me without a cause? I have given you all the attributes which I possess myself, and your courage never fails you except in this one instant." On this the lion groaned and lamented very much, and reproached himself with his cowardice, and wished that he might die. As these thoughts passed through his mind, he met an elephant, and came near to hold a conversation with him. After a time he observed that the elephant shook his ears very much, and he inquired what was the matter, and why his ears moved with such a tremor every now and then. Just at that moment a gnat settled on the head of the elephant, and he replied, "Do you see that little buzzing insect? If it enters my ear, my fate is sealed. I should die presently." The lion said, "Well, since so huge a beast is afraid of a tiny gnat, I will no more complain, nor wish myself dead. I find myself, even as I am, better off than the elephant, in that very same degree that a cock is greater than a gnat." The Lamb and the Wolf. A wolf pursued a lamb, which fled for refuge to a certain temple. The wolf called out to him and said, "The priest will slay you in sacrifice if he should catch you." On which the lamb replied, "It would be better for me to be sacrificed in the temple than to be eaten by you." The Rich Man and the Tanner. A rich man lived near a tanner, and not being able to bear the unpleasant smell of the tan yard, he pressed his neighbor to go away. The tanner put off his departure from time to time, saying that he would remove soon. But as he still continued to stay, it came to pass, as time went on, the rich man became accustomed to the smell, and feeling no manner of inconvenience, made no further complaints. The Mules and the Robbers. 2 mules, well laden with packs, were trudging along. One carried panniers filled with money, the other sacks weighted with grain. The mule carrying the treasure walked with head erect, as if conscious of the value of his burden, and tossed up and down the clear-toned bells fastened to his neck. His companion followed with quiet and easy step. All on a sudden robbers rushed from their hiding-place upon them, and in the scuffle with their owners wounded with a sword the mule carrying the treasure, which they greedily seized upon, while they took no notice of the grain. The mule which had been robbed and wounded bewailed his misfortunes. The other replied, "I am indeed glad that I was thought so little of, for I have lost nothing, nor am I hurt with any wound." The Lion and the Shepherd. A lion, roaming through a forest, trod upon a thorn, and soon after came up towards a shepherd and fawned upon him, wagging his tail as if he would say, "I am a suppliant and seek your aid." The shepherd boldly examined and discovered the thorn, and placing his foot upon his lap, pulled it out and relieved the lion of his pain, who returned into the forest. Some time after, the shepherd, being imprisoned on a false accusation, is condemned to be cast to the lions as the punishment of his imputed crime. The lion, on being released from his cage, recognizes the shepherd as the man who healed him, and instead of attacking him, approaches and places his foot upon his lap. The king, as soon as he heard the tale, ordered the lion to be set free again into the forest, and the shepherd to be pardoned and restored to his friends. The Camel and Jupiter. The camel, when he saw the bull adorned with horns, envied him, and wished that he himself could obtain the same honors. He went to Jupiter and besought him to give him horns. Jupiter, vexed at his request because he was not satisfied with his size and strength of body, and desired yet more, not only refused to give him horns, but even deprived him of a portion of his ears. The Panther and the Shepherds. A panther, by some mischance, fell into a pit. The shepherds discovered him and threw sticks at him, and pelted him with stones, while some of them, moved with compassion towards one about to die, even though no one should hurt him, threw in some food to prolong his life. At night they returned home, not dreaming of any danger, but supposing that on the morrow they should find him dead. The panther, however, when he had recruited his feeble strength, freed himself with a sudden bound from the pit, and hastened home with rapid steps to his den. After a few days he came forth and slaughtered the cattle, and, killing the shepherds who had attacked him, raged with angry fury. Then they, who had spared his life, fearing for their safety, surrendered to him their flocks, and begged only for their lives, to whom the panther made this reply, "I remember alike those who sought my life with stones, and those who gave me food. Lay aside, therefore, your fears. I return as an enemy only to those who injured me." The Eagle and his Captor. An eagle was once captured by a man who at once clipped his wings and put him into his poultry yard with the other birds, at which treatment the eagle was weighed down with grief. Another neighbor, having purchased him, suffered his feathers to grow again. The eagle took to flight, and pouncing upon a hare, brought it at once as an offering to his benefactor. A fox, seeing this, exclaimed, "Do not propitiate the favor of this man, but of your former owner, lest he should again hunt for you and deprive you a second time of your wings." The Eagle and the Kite. An eagle, overwhelmed with sorrow, sat upon the branches of a tree in company with a kite. "Why," said the kite, "do I see you with such a rueful look?" "I seek," she replied, "for a mate suitable for me, and I am not able to find one." "Take me," returned the kite. "I am much stronger than you are." "Why, are you able to secure the means of living by your plunder?" "Well, I have often caught and carried away an ostrich in my talons." The eagle, persuaded by these words, accepted him as her mate. Shortly after the nuptials, the eagle said, "Fly off, and bring me back the ostrich you promised me." The kite, soaring aloft into the air, brought back the shabbiest possible mouse, and stinking from the length of time it had lain about in the fields. "Is this," said the eagle, "the faithful fulfillment of your promise to me?" The kite replied, "That I might attain to your royal hand, there is nothing that I would not have promised, however much I knew that I must fail in the performance." The Monkey and the Camel. The beasts of the forest gave a splendid entertainment at which the monkey stood up and danced. Having vastly delighted the assembly, he sat down amidst universal applause. The camel, envious of the praises bestowed on the monkey, and desirous to divert to himself the favor of the guests, proposed to stand up in his turn and dance for their amusement. He moved about in so utterly ridiculous a manner that the beasts in a fit of indignation set upon him with clubs and drove him out of the assembly. It is absurd to ape our betters. The Viper and the File. A viper entering the workshop of a smith sought from the tools the means of satisfying his hunger. He more particularly addressed himself to a file, and asked of him the favor of a meal. The file replied, "You must indeed be a simple-minded fellow if you expect to get anything from me, who am accustomed to take from everyone, and never to give anything in return." The covetous are poor givers. The King's Son and the Painted Lion. A king who had only one son, fond of martial exercises, had a dream in which he was warned that his son would be killed by a lion. Afraid lest the dream should prove true, he built for his son a pleasant palace and adorned its walls for his amusement with all kinds of animals of the size of life, among which was the picture of a lion. When the young prince saw this, his grief at being thus confined burst out afresh, and standing near the lion, he thus spoke, "Oh, you most detestable of animals! Through a lying dream of my father's which he saw in his sleep, I am shut up on your account in this palace as if I had been a girl. What shall I now do to you?" With these words, he stretched out his hands toward a thorn tree, meaning to cut a stick from its branches that he might beat the lion, when one of its sharp pricks pierced his fingers and caused great pain and inflammation, so that the young prince fell down in a fainting fit. A violent fever suddenly set in, from which he died not many days after. We had better bear our troubles bravely than try to escape them. The Cat and Venus. A cat fell in love with a handsome young man and entreated Venus that she would change her into the form of a woman. Venus consented to her request and transformed her into a beautiful damsel, so that the youth saw her and loved her and took her home as his bride. While they were reclining in their chamber, Venus, wishing to discover if the cat in her change of shape had also altered her habits of life, let down a mouse in the middle of the room. She, quite forgetting her present condition, started up from the couch and pursued the mouse, wishing to eat it. Venus, much disappointed, again caused her to return to her former shape. Nature exceeds nurture. The Lion and the Bull. A lion, greatly desirous to capture a bull, and yet afraid to attack him on account of his great size, resorted to a trick to ensure his destruction. He approached him and said, "I have slain a fine sheep, my friend, and if you will come home and partake of him with me, I shall be delighted to have your company." The lion said this in the hope that, as the bull was in the act of reclining to eat, he might attack him to advantage and make his meal on him. The bull, however, on his approach to his den, saw the huge spits and giant cauldrons and no sign whatever of the sheep, and without saying a word, quietly took his departure. The lion inquired why he went off so abruptly without a word of salutation to his host, who had not given him any cause of offense. "I have reasons enough," said the bull. "I see no indication whatever of your having slaughtered a sheep, while I do see, very plainly, every preparation for your dining on a bull." The Rose and the Amaranth. An amaranth planted in a garden near a rose tree thus addressed it, "What a lovely flower is the rose, a favorite alike with gods and with men. I envy you your beauty and your perfume." The rose replied, "I indeed, dear amaranth, flourish but for a brief season. If no cruel hand pluck me from my stem, yet I must perish by an early doom. But thou art immortal, and dost never fade, but bloomest forever in renewed youth." The Bald Man and the Fly. A fly bit the bare head of a bald man, who, endeavoring to destroy it, gave himself a heavy slap. Then said the fly mockingly, "You have wished to revenge, even with death, the prick of a tiny insect. What will you do to yourself, who have added insult to injury?" The bald man replied, "I can easily make peace with myself, because I know there was no intention to hurt. But you, an ill-favored and contemptible insect, who delight in sucking human blood, I wish that I could have killed you, even if I had incurred a heavier penalty." The Shipwrecked Man and the Sea. A shipwrecked man, having been cast upon a certain shore, slept after his buffetings with the deep. After a while waking up, when he looked upon the sea, he loaded it with reproaches, that, enticing men with the calmness of its looks, when it had induced them to plough its waters, it grew rough and destroyed them utterly. The sea, assuming the form of a woman, replied to him, "Blame not me, my good sir, but the winds, for I am by my own nature as calm and firm even as this earth. But the winds, falling on me on a sudden, create these waves, and lash me into fury." The Buffoon and the Countryman. A rich nobleman once opened the theaters without charge to the people, and gave a public notice that he would handsomely reward any person who should invent a new amusement for the occasion. Various public performers contended for the prize. Among them came a buffoon well known among the populace for his jokes, and said that he had a kind of entertainment which had never been brought out on any stage before. This report being spread about made a great stir in the place, and the theater was crowded in every part. The buffoon appeared alone upon the boards, without any applause or confederates, and the very sense of expectation caused an intense silence. The buffoon suddenly bent his head towards his bosom, and imitated the squeaking of a little pig so admirably with his voice that the audience declared that he had a porker under his cloak, and demanded that it should be shaken out. When that was done, and yet nothing was found, they cheered the actor, and loaded him with the loudest applause. A countryman in the crowd, observing all that had passed, said, "So help me, Hercules, he shall not beat me at that trick," and at once proclaimed that he would do the same thing on the next day, though in a much more natural way. On the morrow, a still larger crowd assembled in the theater, but now partiality for their favorite actor very generally prevailed, and the audience came rather to ridicule the countryman than to see the spectacle. Both of the performers, however, appeared on the stage. The buffoon grunted and squeaked away first, and obtained, as on the preceding day, the applause and cheers of the spectators. Next the countryman commenced, and pretending that he concealed a little pig beneath his clothes, which in truth he did, but not suspected of the audience, contrived to lay hold of and to pull his ear, when he began to squeak and to express in his pain the actual cry of the pig. The crowd, however, cried out with one consent that the buffoon had given a far more exact imitation, and clamored for the countryman to be kicked out of the theater. On this the rustic produced the little pig from his cloak, and showed by the most positive proof the greatness of their mistake. "Look here," he said, "this shows what sort of judges you are." The Crow and the Serpent. A crow in great want of food saw a serpent asleep in a sunny nook, and flying down, greedily seized him. The serpent, turning about, bit the crow with a mortal wound. The crow, in the agony of death, exclaimed, "O unhappy me, who have found in that which I deemed a happy windfall the source of my destruction." The Hunter and the Horseman. A certain hunter, having snared a hare, placed it upon his shoulders and set out homewards. He met on his way with a man on horseback, who begged the hare of him under the pretense of purchasing it. The horseman, having got the hare, rode off as fast as he could. The hunter ran after him as if he was sure of overtaking him. The horseman, however, increasing more and more the distance between them, the hunter, sorely against his will, called out to him and said, "Get along with you, for I will now make you a present of the hare." The Olive Tree and the Fig. The olive tree ridiculed the fig tree because, while she was green all the year round, the fig tree changed its leaves with the seasons. A shower of snow fell upon them, and finding the olive tree full of foliage, it settled upon its branches, and, breaking them down with its weight, at once despoiled it of its beauty and killed the tree. But finding the fig tree denuded of leaves, it fell through to the ground and did not injure it at all. The Frog's Complaint Against the Sun. Once upon a time, when the sun announced his intentions to take a wife, the frogs lifted up their voices in clamor to the sky. Jupiter, disturbed by the noise of their croaking, inquired the cause of their complaint. One of them said, "The sun, now while he is single, parches up the marsh and compels us to die miserably in our arid homes. What will be our future condition if he should beget other sons?" And so, with the ending of Part 8, we conclude The Fables of Aesop. Good night, Nora.